Hey there, it's Logan Christopher, and this is the Legendary Strength Podcast. Usually we're covering different topics on health and different aspects of training. Today we're going to go in an area that is not my expertise at all, something that I don't personally do a whole of quite a special guest. He's actually my brother, and we're going to be talking about running and specifically barefoot running and how you can do that, why it's better, and all that stuff. So thanks for joining us today, Zane.
Of course. Anytime.
Yeah. So this should be a fun call. I have mentioned you a few times. We definitely got the Superman Herbs thing going on, so people may be a little bit familiar with you. But for those that have never heard of you before, can you give a little background on, how you got started in the fitness world and what led you to doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, all right. I started out, actually, it started with our older brother, really. I used to be a little fat, chubby kid in high school, and my older brother tried to get me to go to the gym and work out with him and stuff. You'll recall that. And it just never really stuck to me. I hated waking up that early and stuff. And so one time he's just like, come running with me on these trails near our house, and I went running with him. And I ran behind him around, we did one loop, and he was pretty slow. I was on his butt the whole time. And once we finished the first loop, he's like, if you're going to pass me, just pass me and do whatever. And so the second time we did the loop, I royally kicked his butt. And ever since then, I've been a runner. I've loved it. And so that's pretty much what started off my fitness, was just running. And I did it for years. I eventually got into racing and stuff. One of the huge things was that I always got blisters when I ran. And actually my feet would go numb when I did longer distances. And I never really understood why these things happen. I just kind of accepted it. All runners do, except that they're going to get painful injuries and stuff. But as my fitness and health career continued, I learned more. I eventually got into all the herbal stuff, thanks mainly to you, actually. And once I started getting into that, started learning about body weight techniques, it just naturally you start to come to a more, I want to say, basic way of working out that's been around for thousands of years, using more nature-made stuff. I'd say it's a hippie way to work out. And so I read a book called Born to Run. Now, Cloud, once again, my older brother, he told me about a guy that was in the Special Forces, and he would run barefoot over trails and stuff. And this was 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and I was like, that's crazy. How does anyone ever do that? And I never expected myself to actually get into it, but I read this book, Born to Run, and the guy's very good about laying out all the scientific evidence. It's just one aspect of the book is barefoot running, and it's because there's one guy in the book that he brings along that is a really good barefootist. And he lays out all the scientific information currently available that says that we are actually, it evolved to run barefoot. We're not supposed to run in shoes. And the whole running in shoes phenomenon, it has only 30, 40 years right now, thanks to Nike.
It reminds me of the scene from Anchorman where he's talking about he's going jogging or yogging. It may be a soft as a new fad back in the 70s. So there's quite a few things I want to touch on there. So Born to Run, pretty much everyone that's a runner, they speak about that book very highly. And you said there's one chapter in there about the barefoot. So do you remember some of the science? What are some of the reasons behind that?
Well, let's see. Well, a good one to start out is well, he cited some studies that there's a lot of studies coming out about this because people are interested in it, and there's a huge movement to go back to what our ancestors did, like with paleo and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So a lot more studies are coming out like that, and barefoot running would be going back to your ancestors too. One of the studies they did was, I think, was this in 2009? They studied running shoes
Mm-hmm.
and how much torque would affect the joints on running shoes compared to going barefoot and walking in heels. And they actually found out that just running in running shoes is way worse for your joints than even walking in heels, which most people would assume would be the opposite because running shoes are supposed to protect your feet.
Right.
So that's one study. Another study they did focused on the expensiveness of running shoes and how much cushion they had. So the more expensive they are, usually the more heel they have, the more cushion to protect your shoe, prevent you from rolling, all that stuff. And they found that shoes over $100 always ended up being way more injury prone than wearing shoes that were just like $40. So the cheaper the shoe you got, the better for you injury-wise in the long run. And that doesn't make any sense if you look at the shoe industry, because they're all about preventing roll, like getting the right orthopedic for you so that you don't have foot injuries or joint or ankle injuries. But it's almost guaranteed if you're going to be wearing running shoes, and I experience this, and most people do. They say something like 90% of runners will get injured every year wearing running shoes.
Yeah, lots of knee injuries, back injuries, ankle injuries, all kinds of things from it.
And barefoot running kind of gets rid of a lot of that.
Okay, I definitely want to get into that in more detail. The one thing that people are going to find if they've ever experimented with any sort of barefoot running is you go out and you try and you really can't take much in the beginning. And if you really do try to do too much, you can go overboard in this and set yourself up for injuries in a different way. So talk about really how to break into barefoot running.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
And I think it'd also actually be good to talk about like the low-tech shoes, which are, I guess, kind of high-tech, like things like Vibram 5 Fingers or flat-soled shoes, and doing that versus the running shoes versus barefoot, the differences between those.
Okay, well, I'll just tell you how I got into it, because I incorporate all that stuff. The first thing, and I just want to make this clear, the very first thing is always you have to start really slow. Because if you go your normal pace, which everyone wants to, just start out and keep running the same. No one likes really going back and having to work on getting back to where they were. I definitely did not like it. But if you do it correctly, it's not going to take you as long to get to like where I'm at right now. So I started out my very first run barefoot. I was like, screw it, I'm just going to try it. I had this 1 mile route planned out on my friend's little man-made island, and I fell in love with it right then and decided to increase my run. I just kept running because it felt so good. It's so different from wearing shoes because you feel everything. And actually, compared to your hand and your mouth, the feet have, I think, the third or the fourth most sensors of any part of your body.
Huh.
So when you wear shoes, you're blocking out all those sense feelings, and they actually assist you in your running.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, I ran 3 miles. My feet were killing me when I got home, and for the next 3 days, I could barely walk.
Yeah.
And that is a common thing.
I have a similar story to that. In our hometown, Santa Cruz, California, they have a race called the Wharf to Wharf, which is 6 miles or 10 kilometers. And I've done that a number of times in the past just for fun. And one of the years I did it, I was starting to learn about these barefoot things. So I was like, well, I didn't actually even have running shoes at the time, but I also wasn't really involved in running, so I didn't train for it at all.
Yeah.
I think I went running all of maybe 2 miles in preparation for a 6-mile race. So I was wearing the Vibram 5 fingers, and I went and did the race, and after about the second mile, my lower legs quit cooperating, and I basically shuffled the rest of the 4 miles, and I was sore for over a week from that, and it definitely wasn't good, and I think I might have been slightly injured from it too. It was beyond just soreness. So yeah, you got to be careful with it. I can concur on that point.
Race, though, right?
What? I did finish the race, yeah.
That's all that matters, right? No.
It wasn't in a very fast time, though.
Well, that's the thing, even with Vibram. So I ran barefoot, but I was still skeptical of the whole thing, and so I would also cross-train in my shoes normally, and I'd try foot strike, fore strike in my shoes, which to me is still kind of stupid, but it does kind of get you used to fore striking. And then
for people that may not be familiar with the terms or what that means, can you explain a little detail?
I mean the fore strike. So when you run, normally with shoes, when you're wearing cushioning shoes, it's natural for you to start to heel strike in most people, not everyone. And that's just because of the shoes, the high heel and stuff. It just makes it easier. When you walk barefoot and stuff, you're supposed to heel strike. So I think the extra padding and stuff kind of just confuses your body mechanics into thinking you're just walking or something weird like that. So you tend to heel strike when you're wearing shoes if you're running. But when you run barefoot or in minimalist shoes, you will find instantly that you cannot heel strike because it will send shockwaves all the way up your leg, and it will really hurt.
Yeah.
So you will go to a midfoot or forefoot strike to compensate for that, and that is the natural way to run because it turns your whole leg and foot into a one giant spring.
Mm-hmm.
And this conserves energy and helps you run. I can explain that a little more later. But so those are the terms. So even if you're wearing shoes, they find now it's a little better to do fore strikes instead of heel strikes, because then you're not getting that huge shock wave going up your leg, even if you're wearing shoes. So that's a good way to
so that can be practiced regardless of what you're wearing.
Before you do anything. Ideally, you should at least be doing that, even if you're going to stick with shoes.
Okay.
So I was doing both shoes. I threw on some barefoot, but I finally went and bought some Vibrams, like when they first came out. I think you gave me the idea, actually.
I'm a trendsetter.
Yeah, for sure. And I love them. I thought it felt like running barefoot. It's not exactly the same feeling. And I ended up started wearing those, and I wore those for every run after that. And it is kind of cool. It does give you protection and stuff, and you still have the feeling of running barefoot. You will definitely work out your feet a lot more and your ankles and all those little muscles because you don't have something holding your foot in a cast, which is what a shoe basically is. And so all in all, I think minimalist shoes are good, but I would not stick to them because even I went a little overboard, and I actually got injured wearing minimalist shoes, kind of like you got injured on that race.
Mm-hmm.
I just went too far, too fast in them, and that's part of their appeal is they can protect you. So people think that they can keep doing these same distances and stuff because their feet aren't screaming at them to chill out and put a break on things and let them rest and get used to this. So a lot of people actually get injured when they switch to Vibrams because, again, they're going too far too fast when they need to. Even with Vibrams, you need to take it slow and let your body get used to this new way of running. So you have to relearn running pretty much.
Because when you're doing the fore striking or the midfoot, it really does engage the entire musculature in a different manner. And if you're not used to that, you're gonna your body's ability to keep up with it will fatigue. And it's when you just push through that and keep going because you're used to running a whole bunch more, then you get that extreme soreness and injury.
Oh yeah, for sure. If you don't. A lot of people also, I didn't know this when I first started fore striking, is you have to bring your heel down. Or ideally you should. Some people don't. But if you don't bring your heel down, you're putting a lot of stress on your Achilles and your calf.
So the ball of the foot hits first, then your heel comes down.
The ball of the foot hits, and then the heel. Yeah, you want to drop the heel. And when I first started, I thought fore strike was you fore strike. You hit the ball of the foot, and then you keep going. So you're basically bouncing along.
Huh.
And don't do that.
Let me ask this. What's the difference? So this is how you run, I would say, at a normal pace. If you're sprinting all out, then it's all going to be on the ball of the foot, right?
Yeah,
for
sure.
Yeah, okay. So it really does depend on the speed. How you walk, regardless of shoes or barefoot, is different from how you run at a moderate speed versus how you sprint. It's all different mechanics in the body.
For sure. Well, you get more speed when you are just on the top of your foot. Because you're getting a larger bounce, but you can't keep that up, and it's not going to be really. And even when I sprint, I try and bring the heel down.
Yeah.
But it's going to slow you down. Bringing the heel down that far even is going to slow you down because that's extra time you're spending doing that. But, oftentimes I'll just fore strike going up a hill because it's easier. And bringing the heel down's a little harder on a hill.
Right, because you'd have to extend it even further.
It's really good for the range of motion. So even practicing it on the hill is really good.
Interesting. Okay, so backing up a little to building up, if someone was to, let's say that they, run some long distances and they want to start trying the barefoot thing, how would you advise them to break into it?
There's this one guy called Barefoot Ken Bob. I learned a lot from him. He has a book that is really good on running and techniques and how to break into it and stuff, called Barefoot Running Step by Step. I highly recommend it. But he thinks that even running, what was it? I think it's 25%, doing 25% of your running and 75% in shoes or whatever. But that 25% is enough to actually prevent running injuries from occurring. So ideally, when you first start breaking into this, you don't even have to do it that much. And I don't recommend it. Like I said, you should go slow. A good way to figure out if you should even start running barefoot, because like you said, a lot of people can't run far barefoot because their feet start to hurt really bad and stuff. And that's because you've been wearing shoes all your life. Your feet are basically weak. The skin is soft. It's weak. It's not going to hold up that well when it's hitting friction and sharp objects along the ground. So you have to build that up, and one really good way is just to go barefoot walking, actually.
Mhm.
And there's some schools of thought on how far you should go, but one of them is just like 45 minutes barefoot walking. If you can do 45 minutes barefoot, you can probably start running without any large problem. And walking 45 minutes barefoot on the street is not actually as easy as it sounds if you're not used to it.
Mhm. I've done some of that myself, and going on hikes, and if there's like little pebbles and rocks, but yeah, in the streets as well, it really is tough when you're starting out with it.
Well, hikes are a good way to start out with it if you can find trails that are more dirt and sand and stuff.
Mhm.
But oh, here's a good thing. A lot of people are like, well, I want to start barefoot running. Should I just go barefoot at the beach? I get that all the time, and I always say no to that one, because the beach it's really soft, and while it's good to barefoot run and stuff, if you don't know how to barefoot run, you don't have the correct form and stuff, it's almost akin to wearing shoes.
Because you can heel strike in the sand get away with it.
Yeah, you can do that, and it's just you're not going to be running correctly. So you don't learn good form at the beach unless you already know the form. Because it's just soft. It's sloppy. You just are just sloppy if you don't know. So I wanted to bring up some techniques for running like that, but I'll do that after we talk about getting started. So I'd say walk for 45 minutes. If you can do that, that's awesome. Just go for a small run and just do it slowly. When your feet hurt, you should stop running. That's kind of how it is. Your feet are your coaches. They tell you when you should stop and when you should go. You will eventually learn how far you can push your limits. But even me, and I've done a couple marathons barefoot, like I still will be so high on running that I push my feet too far and they hurt for a day or two.
Yeah.
So you just gotta, and one of the things I love about barefoot running is it helps you get in tune with yourself more in your body.
Mhm.
And you feel it's more in tune with nature too, because you have that connection. But getting in tune with your body and your feet especially, it's just a different kind of awareness. And it takes a little while to learn it, but you really begin to appreciate it once you start to learn it. So just go slow. That's the whole thing. Go slow. And if you can, you learn from someone how to actually do it right. Because the first, like I was saying, I was running in minimalist shoes. My ankles got really screwed up, both of them, to the point where I couldn't even run without extreme pain. So I ditched the shoes, and I decided right then and there to go full 100% barefoot. And I actually did what I tell people not to do now, which is I went to the beach and ran.
Yeah.
I did that mainly because of my ankle injuries. It didn't hurt as much. And so as my ankles got better, I eventually got off the beach and started just running. And it was a slow process, but I eventually was doing 100% barefoot running. The only thing is I started getting crazy blisters and stuff, and I had no idea how to combat them. And so for a year, I struggled so hard running barefoot to get back to where I was at one point, and it was painful, and I did it the complete wrong way. I really, really should have talked to somebody that had been doing it for a long time. And so I went to a workshop by Barefoot. That's where I learned of his book. And so talking to him, reading his book, everything he said sunk in to a T because I'd been doing it for so long. And immediately after that, I never got blisters anymore. And my the length I could go and my speed both increased, I'd say, by times 10 at least. My length went crazy high after that, just from learning how to correctly run so that you're not using, so there's not friction. And that's what I kind of wanted to talk about.
Yeah, can you share what that big aha was?
The big aha. There's a few things. And the biggest thing I would say is probably the mindset. You have to change your mindset. You can't think like runners think or joggers think where I'm going out to pound the pavement. No. You're going to be barefoot. You don't want to pound the pavement. You don't want to be pushing off or things like that. You don't want to push off the ground. That's not what you're trying to do. If you do those things, there's going to be friction, and your feet are not going to like it. So you change it to your feet are landing on the pavement. You're not pushing. You're lifting off. You're not pushing off.
Okay.
It's a huge imagery thing, but it actually works once you stop talking like that.
Well, I imagine it does also. It may be subtle, but it changes how your muscles are actually used because you're lifting rather than pushing off, which are different mechanics.
Well, that leads into one of the techniques is it's just lifting with your thigh as opposed to pushing up with your foot. And if you think about it, your thigh is a huge combination of muscles and bone, and it's so much easier for you to lift your thigh up because of that. You have all those muscles and stuff, than for you to push down and away with your foot, to lift your entire body weight with your foot and push off the ground that way. Huh. So that was definitely probably the biggest game changer for me. Is just that concept where you're lifting with your thigh. You're lifting a tiny little weight at the end of your leg as opposed to pushing up with pushing all that weight off the ground.
Yeah.
And that in itself will get rid of a tremendous amount of friction.
I have a question. I did a small workshop on pose running. How is these techniques different or the same as that? Because that is supposed to be, a better way to run than what people normally do.
Yeah, it is. It is for sure. It's actually pose running. There's one called chi running, I think. Those are all methods of running how you're supposed to run, and if you run barefoot, you actually do that stuff normally.
Okay.
So all that is, it kind of trains you to run how, and it's actually good to learn that way because you learn how to run correctly. But if you run barefoot, you will naturally do that stuff. Like they talk about falling forward and stuff when you're running and keeping your legs moving under you. Well, when you're running correctly barefoot, that's what happens.
Right. And the whole lift off thing, if I remember correctly, that was definitely in there as well. You're lifting your leg rather than
well, that's
falling forward.
That's huge. No one ever told me that. And that's in the imagery thing. Like, you don't want to push off the ground. You want to lift it. Like, even shod runners, which people wearing shoes, they should use that because that's super important, and it conserves a lot of energy.
Once you have the technique down, right? How long would you say it takes practicing?
You got to actively practice
Right.
Like, when you go running, you got to think about it. But eventually it comes to you naturally.
And when you say it's going to be...
when I run now where I'm like, am I pulling up with my thigh or am I pushing off?
So you'd say it's something that can always be improved upon a little more, and also if you have a lot of repetition in the past, would you say those people will take a little longer for them to groove it in, just because there's so much habit built in?
Yeah, and that's the thing. You gotta kind of let go of everything you learned about running, because which is most of it's going to be wrong. Unfortunately. At least for me, that's how it was. Everything I did before was totally wrong, and it makes perfect sense to me that I had, when I ran over, consecutively, whenever I ran over 10 miles, I would get knee injuries, or my knees would start to hurt and stuff. Or I figured out later that a lot of my lower back pain had to do with me running like that. Because a lot of it went away when I switched to barefoot running. Actually, I have no lower back pain anymore at all, and I used to have it all the time. And I attribute it to barefoot running mostly, and also to sleeping on the floor occasionally. That helps a lot. But you do have to learn these things. Like, it takes a little while, and that's go slow. You don't push through this as fast as possible to get back to where you were. Just go slow. There's no rush.
Yeah.